Over the past few years, everything has changed. Where and how we work and live, the way we collaborate and measure success, and the emerging technologies we use to get it all done. Welcome to The Bridge. Join our host, Scott Kinka, in a series of discussions with top leaders in technology and learn about how they bridge their lives and their businesses into our new hybrid work and AI-driven reality. Our hope is that the insights and experiences will help you on your journey in business and in life from who we were to who we are today. And maybe it'll help you get better prepared for whatever comes next. The Bridge is a service of Bridgepointe Technologies, the nation's leading IT advisory firm. Bridgepointe helps business leaders evaluate, procure, implement, and manage technology and customer experience solutions with a focus on realizing sustainable results for your business growth. And now, here's your host, Scott Kinka.
You probably got into tech because you're a tinkerer, just like me. You like getting your hands dirty. You like making things work. Now you're an IT leader, and you've watched your job go from a call center where you got to play around with things to a partially strategic job to, for many of you now, a seat in the boardroom. My guest on this episode can empathize. Chris MacFarland, a returning guest, is the CEO and chairman of Masergy, which is now fully part of Comcast Business. We'll hear some about that on this episode. He went from building computers in his dorm room to running strategy for a $10 billion business unit for one of the world's largest media and technology companies. And I asked him if he had any advice for you and me, tinkerers turned executives. His answer may surprise you. And if we continue to surprise you here on The Bridge, please make sure you log into your podcast platform, give us a like, a follow, a thumbs up, let more people know about our show. But without further ado, here's my conversation with Chris MacFarland, CEO and chairman of Masergy, a Comcast Business company. Hi, and welcome to another episode of The Bridge. I'm your host, Scott Kinka. And I'm super thrilled to be joined for the second time this year. I think it was maybe 9 months ago we were together last by Chris MacFarland, who's the chairman and CEO of Masergy, which is part of Comcast Business. And we'll talk a little bit more about that on the episode. Welcome back to the podcast, Mr. MacFarland.
Scott, thanks for having me back. Been looking forward to this discussion for a couple of weeks.
Perfect. Well, we have a lot of ground to cover, and we're going to get into it. For those who are our regular listeners, we start with kind of a little bit of a career background and how did you get here? We personalize it a little bit. We're going to skip that portion of the agenda because we got into a lot of that, even some of our shared background in the early days of VoIP. I think we talked about a little bit last time, Chris. We're going to link, for those of you who are paying attention and maybe didn't see that episode, we'll link to the previous episode down in the show notes so you can get a little bit about Chris's background and go through all of that. On our last episode together, Chris, and refreshing you, I guess, as well, we talked a lot about your background as an entrepreneur, founding Masergy, eventual sale to Comcast. And then, at the end, we got into a little bit about, what it's like being sort of a reformed CTO, tinkerer, and an entrepreneur in a big company. And I'm sure we'll get back to a little bit of that today. For this one, I just wanted first to start off with an update. I mean, a lot's gone on inside I think you've sort of completed, if you will, merging Masergy into the overall Comcast Business story. So we'll just start there. Maybe just give us an update at a corporate level on what's going on.
Absolutely. And happy to do so. And again, I think the work that you do here with the podcast is just stellar and great for the broader community. Since we met 9 months ago, there's been a lot of change in a lot of different areas. I think mostly for the positive when you think about it. And then inside of Comcast Business, last year was kind of a marquee year for us on a couple of respects. One, Comcast Business, hit this kind of accolade of being, roughly a $10 billion business inside of Comcast totally. We completed the integration of Masergy. I mean, there's still some work to be done on the IT systems, but, I think we're super proud of the fact that Comcast Business now has more than 2.5 million customers, that we power more businesses than anyone else in America, including now AT&T. That was kind of the last hurdle for us to get over. we're still growing at a very, very healthy rate. And then I think that's probably most relevant to a lot of this audience is our indirect channel business, finally hit the $1 billion mark, and it's still growing as well. And so we're just super excited about kind of the future. And I thought it was important to, share a little bit about some major organizational changes that we have inside of CB. So those that know CB well know that we had kind of, a handful of operational divisions inside of Comcast Business. Last November, we had a change in leadership. Ed Zimmerman is now, the president of Comcast Business. Bill Stemper moved into being chairman emeritus. And as part of that, there was a relook at strategy and where we wanted to head over the next decade. And I think smartly so, we made this decision to collapse down and to streamline the organization itself and to kind of split the business into thinking about it two different ways. One is around small business solutions, and the second one is through enterprise solutions. Mm-hmm. And you're going to hear this recurring theme from us probably ad nauseum from this point forward, which is all about, how do we really, really enhance the cyber posture of any size business? And then how do we make them more resilient in a world where, we've seen the journey to the cloud, digital transformation. I know all these monikers that have been around for a while, but it's just been accelerated, especially when you think about AI and AGI. And then inside the direct channel itself, we had a big leadership change. Craig Schlongbaum, chose to retire from the business, although I think we'll see him again somewhere in the broader community at some point in time. But Matt Fosnot, who's no stranger to the channel, is now the channel chief for Comcast Business. And he's attached at the hip, with me or vice versa, thinking through what are the right changes that we need to make. And there's been some changes in strategy. So I talked about the two business segments and where we're focused on solutions. And I think that's the thing that I'm most excited about. One, we talked about this a little bit last time, Bill, Ed, Terry Connell, Craig, who's no longer with us, but Matt, like all these people are, and all the people you don't know, they're just such high quality people. And I think that's one of the remarkable things that, Brian Roberts and then his father, Ralph, who founded Comcast, was able to achieve is just being able to put the right people from a leadership standpoint and then the right people on the front lines to be a part of the, the kind of the Comcast family. So I covered a lot right there. But I want to pause so that I can answer any questions that you have.
No, I mean, it makes perfect sense. Let me ask sort of a macro level conversation, a macro level question, which is, I think, for tech leaders who are listening to this, CIOs who've engaged with Masergy in the past and maybe know some of the legacy, really thought of Masergy sort of as, high-end network aggregator / managed service provider around those services. And I may be oversimplifying it, but I think you kind of get where I'm going. How do we think about, you've finished this together. Now, obviously, think about Comcast differently in that, just the wires you have in the ground, the miles of your own connectivity. How do we rationalize those two businesses together? And I guess some of that is in the idea that you've got sort of the small business segment and the enterprise segment. But can you just sort of answer that, like, together now, what does that look like?
No, I think it's a great question. And my hope and our collective aspirations is that over time, all of our channel partners, all of our customers will think about Comcast in a different light. And so when you think about, where we've been the last 15 years, I'm talking about CB, not Masergy. We have this remarkable infrastructure where we've sold a tremendous amount of connectivity, mostly in the form of broadband internet and Ethernet services, largely in our Comcast Business heavy infrastructure footprints. And the market share that we have there in connectivity and small business services is, in most markets, it's more than 50% market share. So we're literally the incumbent on the connectivity side.
Yeah.
Now, when you think about enterprise solutions, so think broader mid-market to, the Fortune 100, we're kind of single digit from a market share standpoint. Now we're approaching 10%, but just the North American marketplace is, $50 billion opportunity. So you can say when you look at, the revenue that we're at versus the white space there, it's not insignificant.
Yeah.
But when we look at what that really means, looking backwards, like the high-end stuff that Masergy did and then the high-end stuff that CB did, which was largely around, the retail vertical, we now believe that this is the year that Comcast Business, an aspiration, we want to be the leader in global secure networking, and we think we have a plan to execute against that. It's about how do we serve these different segments in a thoughtful way with more than just connectivity. And so you'll see these massive investments in us in both, one, we're going to compete in all markets in North America, not just the Comcast infrastructure market. So we're adding tons of salespeople out of market. We're investing heavily in Western Europe underneath the Sky brand, which is a part of Comcast. And then secondarily, the solutions that we're bringing to market, and this is probably where you might be headed because there's all of these people that do, what I think are great over-the-top solutions. We want to have a right to compete to win that business as well. We've got a SASE-based, cloud-first product that we're just now launching, this month that meets kind of that lower mid-market solution set that we really haven't had in the channel, much less even with our own direct sales force. So that's a big gap that we're solving. We've got a zero trust-based secure clouding networking product coming out in the fall that we're super excited about. And so now, and then on the very low end, somebody who just has broadband internet, 10-employee company, where we probably already have broadband internet if they're in a Comcast market, we've got a solution called Secure Network Edge that enhances their cyber profile, gives them the resiliency of technology like SD-WAN or SASE, and can do it for a single site for, just another couple $100 a month. But greatly enhances. So there's this broader theme, Scott, where, I feel like, we have this responsibility to U.S. companies, no matter the size, to really, really, help them out with their cyber posture and their resiliency. And so this whole secure networking theme is, we're all in on this. And we feel like, there's no reason for Comcast Business not to be, the market leader in both small business and enterprise. Granted, it'll probably take us, half a decade to a decade to get there, but that's okay in it. We're in it for the long run here.
Got it. So I want to just make sure we don't skip over two things that were in there, and I think they were super important. One was growing into areas of the country where, they're not Comcast markets per se, right? Where you're adding salespeople and you're moving into them. So in that world, you would, effectively aggregate others' connectivity so that you can provide a universal network in the same way that kind of the Lex, CLEX that you compete against would have historically done, right? I just want to make sure that I got that right.
100% accurate. Both CB prior to the Masergy acquisition and then enhanced by Masergy were focused on off-net connectivity. And now we're going to bring solutions plus off-net connectivity and our own connectivity. So you should think about Comcast Business in a true global spirit now.
Got it.
And we're focused on, just delivering the right outcomes for the right opportunity.
Perfect. The second one, and I'm sure I can tell you guys have been working through this strategy because you were very purposeful about your words. You said global secure networking. You didn't say connectivity, which is a different thing. I mean, that's a sub of that, right? But really providing networking solutions. So I want to unpack that a little bit, just spend a little bit more time on that, because you did mention, and I agree with you, there are a lot of great kind of over-the-top, logical, next-generation networking and security products and service providers and suppliers out there who, you would sit on top of a connectivity option. And obviously, I would venture to guess for many of those suppliers, the actual connectivity that's servicing their solution, in many cases, is provided by Comcast. But in the world that you're sort of angling towards, it's the global provider of secure networking. You're asking your customers, I think you said now sort of in the small to mid-sized market, and then maybe later in the year with the zero trust product a little bit further up market, to trust you guys also for the intelligence portion, for want of a better term. And I know it's wider than that, but to trust you guys for that as well. Speak to your thoughts, Chris, if you will, on the difference between sort of layering and over the top on somebody else's network versus kind of getting it all in the box.
Yeah, it's a great question. Listen, there's a ton of companies out there that have great as a service platforms that ride on top of the connectivity that we sell to our customers. And that's not ever going to change. But we think there's key things that when you combine the connectivity with the managed services around the secure networking domain and cybersecurity domain and UCaaS domains, is incredibly more powerful because of some of the differentiation that we can provide, to those customers. They still always have the power of choice, but we feel like we're kind of uniquely positioned to not only invest given the size and scale of the business that we're at, and then secondarily, why would you not choose to go with this? And I can tell you, even in the last year, I mean, we just completed the first quarter of 2024. It was by far one of the best, sales quarters Comcast Business has ever seen.
Wow.
The channel had a stellar quarter. We're winning opportunities that Comcast Business 3 years ago would not have been able to win. So it's kind of a super, exciting time for me. But that being said, there's this white space, specifically in the channel, where, and it's going to take some time. I'd love to think that we could accomplish it in 2024, but I know Matt Fosnot is deeply focused on that. But we want people to think about Comcast Business differently. We just want the right to have the opportunity to compete for the business.
Mm-hmm.
I'm hopeful that if we compete, we'll win more times than not. But, people think about us as this broadband company historically, right? And then they, on the transport side, where we win almost everything that's in our markets, right?
Yeah.
And then when you think about, high-end global opportunities, that was Masergy's forte. We win that business, and that's been accelerating. But it's kind of that cross-section that's mid-market. And so you think, well, who would we typically compete with? And we'll think, companies like Ariaka and companies, that are in kind of that SASE space, but are down market from where Masergy has been. Historically, Cato would be probably another good example of that. But again, I'm excited because we're able to take, some of the AI ops work that we've done, and we're going to push that down. The threat management response things that we do to enhance cyber posture, push that down to a single site. So you could be a bakery, and we're going to give you some things that you probably never would have had before, and it'll be in an automated fashion because there's a difference in scale for these things. Yeah. But we've been incredibly thoughtful about, wanting to have the right to compete, but more importantly, having the right to win. And then lastly, doing it at a competitive level, both with the technology, the solutions, the managed services, and the customer experience, but at a rate that's compelling as well.
Let's you mentioned AI. Let's stay there for a minute. I was fortunate enough to have been invited to the Innovation Center, I guess Comcast 2 Tower, right? Here in Philly for the Innovation Summit. I guess it was probably a month or so ago. Which was spectacular. And of course that was across all the businesses, right?
Yeah.
The entertainment business and the parks business, and Sky was there, and obviously Comcast Business was represented. But it was really the innovation conference. So it was less about, hey, here's all the goodies that you're going to get, and more about the work that you're doing. So it was, as opposed to it being sort of brand or business, focused from a Comcast perspective, it was topically focused. It's a big section on AI. And, obviously there's innovations being made all throughout the Comcast NBC Universal family around AI. Tell me, specifically inside of Comcast Business, where you guys are leaning in.
Yeah, so I'm glad that you were able to see that when you were at the Technology Center. There is a lot of different projects in flight inside of Comcast under the broader, call it AI umbrella. When we think about Comcast Business, we see multiple areas of significant, opportunity. And I know you and I chatted a little bit about this 9 months ago, but as we see, large language models accelerate, machine learning capabilities accelerate, our CTO and CIOs have been focused on where are the things that we could go make a difference in either the customer experience or the reliability. On the networking side, we've got some AI ops technology that helps, customers have visibility to things that they probably wouldn't have visibility on their own. And we see that impact them every day. Secondarily, when you look down at small business, we have one of the fastest growing, mobile platforms in North America. So mobile is a big part of our strategy in the small business segment. But we feel like there's some things we can do to greatly enhance the dialogue between us and that small business customer, where they can talk to a sales agent / operations agent that's able to really help them navigate all the complexity of mobile, without having to wait to talk to a live human. We literally think that we can take, somewhere between 80-90% of that interaction and help them so that it's fast. Because we think that, and we know that this AI assisted world is kind of where we're at the next couple of years, and then hopefully beyond that. Probably one of the more exciting things to me is not thinking about just Comcast, but our industry and then just the society at large is, we probably have the equivalent of a 500 million, non-paid people coming into the workforce, over the next few years, and it's going to dramatically enhance, the productivity, of all of us, across the domain. So again, there's a lot of things that I could go into. Unfortunately, most of it's still not public.
I get it.
But Comcast is definitely, just like I think every business in America, evaluating, deploying, get projects in flight, and then have a longer term roadmap that gets rewritten every 90 days because there's just so much
happening.
Advancement on top of innovation. We're truly in this exponential curve with this technology.
I guess one of the things that was probably obvious, but you didn't really think about it until it was stated, I think that was shared there, was that when you look at the multiple businesses that fall in the family, right? You got the consumer business and all those areas where you're, I'm connecting to this service on a Comcast connection right now from my home, right? You've got the mobile business, you've got the small business unit, you've got the enterprise focus. Now you have all of the data that you're collecting on the entertainment side. You've got everything as it relates to the parks. I mean, the cool thing is that for large language models to be effective, they need to be trained. And you guys are in a unique position that there is a 360-degree view of data that is probably very unique to Comcast amongst the kinds of companies like you in the United States. I mean, you're the entertainment that's being consumed, the consumer who is consuming them, and the business networks that are also connected. You've got access to all of that data to inform your models, which to me just sort of popped off the page as we were thinking about it. I don't recall the numbers, but there was sort of one slide where they were like, if you consider all of these sources of information, we think we can inform our models to be useful to us, X times faster than anybody else could, because we have the consumer and the entertainment side as well.
Being an insider, it's such a different perspective of the world. I get asked, and thankfully it's slowed down, but typically when I meet a peer or a colleague or an employee, one of the questions I get, if they're brave enough, is like, why are you still here? And I said, well, fundamentally, there's a few things. One, there's a lot of work still to be done on the integration and getting us to the right glide path. Two, it's high quality people. Every executive, middle manager, and frontline employee that I've met are just really good people. So I think the culture is just stellar and was incredibly easy to navigate through the integration. And then third, arguably we're the largest media and telecommunications company in the world. And I don't think a lot of people see that day to day, but like, we have more internet traffic than anyone, period.
Yeah.
Right. So the data that rides over our network is second to no one. It's basically us and then a bunch of other companies, and then there's Google on the other side from a data center perspective, right? And then that landscape's changing because of the velocity of Azure over the last few years, and then when you think about the media component between the studios, NBC, Sky in Europe, which is arguably, for those of you that are North American folks, is kind of the ESPN of Europe. Mm-hmm. And then we have all these other brands in other countries. And then we have Universal Studios. A lot of people don't realize it, but like Oppenheimer was Universal, was us. We had two of the most, accredited movies in the past year. But then being able to have insights to like, what's next? How are we thinking about this? Video, linear cable has been on the decline for quite a few number of years, mm-hmm. right? We're seeing this, change with technologies, and we think we've got insights that are second to none in this case, because it is a broader view, but it's a really thoughtful view, which is, how do we make people's lives better through media? How do we make their lives better through the communication services? And now for the stuff that I'm focused on is how do we enhance, the cyber posture, because cyber is still top of mind right after reliability, right? And then in a world that's gotten more complex, how do we simplify that? And so it's just an exciting time, because you're right. And I hate to say it, those of us that are much larger in nature have not only the ability to invest for growth, we have the ability to take longer bets around how do we leverage data, but still do it in a way that's thoughtful around privacy, right? Because we have all the information, but I should say this, we are so much more caring than the big cloud vendors in terms of what privacy means and what that means to the individual and to our customers.
Yeah, and that was a big theme there as well. I want to hit on something though, because you were talking about your career and the things that you're interested in and the work that you're continuing to do, which is around strategy. And as I was going through, just prepping this morning for this episode, I read through our previous conversation. We had a little bit of fun, sort of as I think I called myself a reformed CTO, and you might have called yourself something like, master tinkerer or something along those lines back in the day. But, here we are having, both of us are engaged in strategy roles in certainly bigger companies than we founded or started, right? And we met each other way back then in many, I look at it and I think that in many ways that parallels probably what a lot of our listeners have experienced over recent years, like where we, I don't get my hands dirty nearly as much as I used to, but a lot of IT directors are now CIOs or CTOs, and they're, in a board, they went from their constituents being other nerds like them to being the business people in the business, right? Being the salespeople and the executives and the, CEOs. I'm curious, just in that journey from entrepreneur, building PCs, like all the craziness where you got started through today. What kind of advice would you have for sort of the director or VP of IT who's finding themselves a CIO and finding themselves in a different peer group, that's really around business, the business people, if you will?
Yeah, and then I think during our lifetime, Scott, we've seen those roles go from pure cost centers to then being partially strategic to where now today the CIO or the CTO, depending on who's leading that, is in the boardroom, right?
Yeah.
And so, the advice that I can give to anyone that's worked their ways up operationally is that, strategy in addition to execution, strategy becomes just more and more important, but you have to have faith that the team underneath you can execute, right? Because, if you can't execute, you're done. I think a bad culture, you're probably not able to have durability, meaning over years and decades. And then, you want to work yourself to the point to where you're 80% strategy if you want to be a CIO or CTO today. And there's a lot of change coming at you fast. And so I think the biggest shift that I've also seen is, like inside of Comcast Business, we call it the long range plan. Everybody's got a different name for like a 5-year or 10-year strategy, is not to get so trenched in on what's 3 to 5 years out. Have a sense of that's pretty fuzzy to get there, because things are moving at this exponential rate that we've talked about. So I haven't seen anybody's long-term plans recently, shift. And then I think that's the other thing. And, I don't think we talked about this last time, but if you're an IT leader today, you have to think and be thoughtful, like, how do I deal with exponential growth, if that's what's occurring in your business? Or how do I deal with exponential technology?
Yeah.
Because it's disrupting so many things that have probably been commonplace. Or even in their own business, how do I add so much strategic value so that we have durability and don't get disrupted ourselves? And so, I see the best CIOs just leaning really, really in. In fact, we had a conference down at the Players and brought in 100, CIOs and spent, a couple of days with them.
Wow.
And what I saw, this recurring theme, Scott, was that, the leaders that are there today are thinking about all these things at the same time. And I heard the same thing. Is like, the team that I have, I'm so grateful that they can take the ball and run with these things, or I've got experts over these other areas, because the pace, that pace of innovation is just not going to slow down. And arguably, with AI and AGI coming
Yeah.
online over the next, I don't know when, 2 to 3
Yeah.
years, maybe 5, um, it's just going to accelerate, which I think is an awesome time to be in this, but it's also a bit mind bending when you really think through what the details of this might look like.
Yeah. I do love what you said about planning. I mean, I find that that's one of the biggest challenges moving from sort of keeping I love what you said about, it's a cost center. It's a strategic business, now it's a profit center. I think one of the big differentials, and I think one of the biggest challenges that we see with IT leaders is just moving towards the plan. Like being able to put pen to paper is a skill that in a lot of ways, outside of managing a list of tasks, you know what I mean, that you really haven't had to do, building that strategic vision. Sitting down with a blank piece of paper is intimidating. Right? Like at
Yeah.
the end of the day, like
Yes.
I always say to our guys, when we just went through a big exercise on our side with all of our technology practice leads, where we're like, you got to plan your business, and we're going through it. Don't let your portfolio happen to you, right? Don't sell the thing that the customer asked for every time. We are being asked to place your bets. Why, right? But if you do, that a little bit, I'll tack a hunk of advice on there. I'll answer my own question to some extent. When you're looking at that blank page, I've always said to our guys who are trying that for the first time, I'm like, if you just start with the facts, the answers make themselves apparent.
They do.
Like build a table of contents around like, what are all the things I know? And let me get it in one spot. And if you do that, by the time you get to page 9 of your reality, you're like, wow, what's next should be actually reasonably easy. It's when you sit down and you start with a blank piece of paper and you go, let me write what's next that you miss. Right. So super interesting. Any comment on that? Anything you want to add
Yeah,
on that?
I think you're 100% spot on. One, sometimes it's hard to get the fact base right.
Yeah.
Especially as there's just, I wouldn't call it competing agendas, but people that are focused on different things, especially leaders. And then I think secondarily, you want people aligned. And, it's the same thing. Almost every CIO that has left a company, I've had a discussion around why they left. I hear this recurring theme. I was having to play more defense than offense.
Mm.
And playing defense nonstop usually meant they didn't have the resources to play offense. And so they got into this technical debt area, or this area where they were just dealing with the challenge of the week or the day or the crisis of the business that month. And there's always going to be challenges. There's always going to be an occasional crisis. But if you're stuck in a state where that's all you're doing, then you're probably going to drown. That's the raw reality of the situation. So always have a healthy balance. And as you move up that chain, you've got to play more offense than defense.
100%. Yeah. I mean, I love that as a thought process. We want to invest in AI, but our budget hasn't increased. Right. So how do you get to the offense if you're playing defense all the time? It's obviously one of the things that we focus on with our customers all the time. It's just how do we optimize the plumbing in your business so you can go be creative, right? I mean, ultimately at the end of the day. So totally get it. Before we wrap, and I always end with funny questions, and we don't need to reiterate those because you answered them already. But what I do want to bring something back from our previous call. I always ask about what you were reading, and at the time, you mentioned some stuff. I think you were into lifespan. This whole thing around lifespan last time. You remember that?
Yeah, I do.
Still digging in on that. And have you learned anything new as you're sort of going through that process?
I mean, listen, the life sciences, longevity, lifespan, health span world, I think is going to be a huge shock to people about 3 years from where we're at today.
Okay.
And when I say huge shock, I think, things we talked about before, personalized medicine, this shift from this Western medicine, which is largely treat the symptom, not the cause of the disease.
Yeah.
I think we're going to pivot. And I think it's going to be awesome because, just in North America, we got a huge obesity problem. I struggle with it myself, but knowing how to personalize it, and then more importantly, how to just be healthier and how to live, mental and physical health, I think is awesome. And then on the book side, I'm reading a book called The Coming Wave written by Mustafa Suleiman, who was one of the founders of DeepMind and was at Google, and
Okay.
he's been around in the domain before. Most of us even calling it machine learning, much less large language model. AIs and the predecessor to AGI, but it's just really thinking through there is a tsunami coming. We don't know whether, and this is the tsunami of AGI.
Yeah.
We don't know if this is coming in 2 to 3 years or if it's coming right at the end of the decade, but we do know it's coming.
Yeah.
And, this world of abundance, which, people like Peter Diamandis has been preaching about for almost a decade. I mean, you can just see it, but it's going to be disruptive. It's going to it's going to replace a lot of people's jobs. It's going to help a lot of people's jobs.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many things that are exciting, and there's so many things that are,
equally terrifying.
Equally terrifying, right? It's like and it's funny because it was like 4 years ago, 3 or 4 years, I was talking about this on another panel. We were talking about it, but now that we're on the precipice, you can almost see over the edge of this cliff, and it will be I think in a decade it'll be a totally new world.
Yeah.
I think our children will look back and think about how archaic we were.
Well, I love that. And I think, maybe we can look back and say, this was the little part we played.
Absolutely.
All of that, maybe if we're fortunate enough.
Hey, listen, we're the pre-Google guys, right? So, I mean,
you're right. Exactly.
How more exciting could it be? We got to live through these two massive transitions. So.
100%. Chris, I feel like I could talk to you forever. I mean, we could do it on camera. So I'm looking forward to getting on with you again. We said we were going to make this shorter because we didn't have to do all the intros, and here we are 35 minutes into it. So I'm going to, in the interest of our listeners hanging with us, I think I'm going to close it out at this point. And thank you for your time. So great having you on the bridge.
As always, Scott.
Of course. Thanks so much. And for any more information you'd like to find out, obviously you can check out Chris on LinkedIn. He's there. Obviously, Comcast is a very big partner of Bridgepointe. We worked together for quite some time, and we're having a lot of success together. So certainly reach out to your friendly neighborhood Bridgepointe strategist if you're in a position and want to learn a little bit more. And we'll be looking forward to hearing from you soon, or seeing you soon on another episode of The Bridge. Thanks. Listen, if you made it this far, there must have been some good content, or you're just a fan or a relative of mine. In either case, we appreciate you spending your most valuable asset with us, your time. We don't take that lightly. We'd also like to say one more time that we're appreciative of Bridgepointe Technologies and their belief and sponsorship of this show. We hope that if you or someone you know is thinking about your company's digital transformation, or simply the next IT project that you may not have the resources, budget, or time to get to, I'm sure that Bridgepointe, one of the country's fastest growing technology advisory and procurement firms, can help. Check out bridgepointtechnologies.com. Don't forget the E on Bridgepointe, or simply reach out to me at Skinka, SKINKA, at bpt3.net. Also take a minute, please, if you would, to give us a 5-star review on your favorite platform. It helps give us the visibility to reach other people like you. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Bridge. I'm Scott Kinka, and until next time, there's a lot of noise out there in business and in life. Do what you can to be the signal. Thanks.